Hello and welcome back to Nolan Financial Radio. My name is Tara Nolan. And if you are new to the show, I just want to take a minute and welcome you. We have a lot of fun with this show. It's educational and we show you different examples. Last time we were talking about financial follies. And I kind of think we actually talk about financial follies every time because there's nothing better than learning from someone else's mistakes, if you will. If you're new, though, I would just encourage you to, if you have a question or you want to set up a complimentary appointment, give Chris and I a call at 719-210-4242. That's 719-210-4242. And you can also visit our website, www.nolanfinancialpartners.com. While you're there, you can actually set up a discovery call right through the website. But you can also check out past radio shows because we record these and we do topics all the way from Medicare, Social Security, 401k, small business planning. Kind of if it's related to finance, we've done it because setting yourself up for financial success starts with being able to ask good questions. And so that's what this is all about. Before we jump into our show today, though, I wanted to say hello to my amazing co-host, Tony Shore. Tony, how are you doing?
Well, I'm doing pretty good, Tara, but I was trying to adjust the lighting, thinking it could help. Something could help this mess. Lighting isn't going to help today. My glasses are causing shadows. So I was, Tara, I was built for radio. I've told you that before. I've talked about this. We talked about this. I'm built for radio, not video. But nowadays, you got to hit all formats, and I know videos become really popular. And I'm glad we're doing the show live so people can watch. I mean, I think they're watching you and getting the advice from you, and I'm along for the ride. So hopefully, the people can always tape a paper up over my half of the screen if they need to.
We're being paid for our information, Tony, not our looks.
I'm only getting paid for my voice. That's what I've got, and that's happening. So that's important.
Instead of being a hand model, you're a voice model.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, ensure the golden pipes. Yeah, so to speak. So, Tara, how have you been? What's going on over there?
Tony, just it's everything's going. I'm slowly heading to the March 29th is the launch date for my book. And Tony, it's really been a solid 2 years at this point, from, conception to, with the first rough drafts to starting the outline and doing my book writing workshop and getting better at storytelling. Cause I'm a very engineer type thinker, and I really have had to work on using a story first because what I realize is I already have the picture in my head and I need to communicate with you. I need to build the picture in your head first. And then we can get to the punchline, where I just want to go right to the punchline. And so it's like a forever process learning how to communicate. So anyway.
Well, yeah, it is a long process. You said 2 years, and believe me, I know we've been doing the show this whole time, and we started talking about you doing a book 2 years ago. And I love how it's even how it's morphed and changed over those 2 years. I mean, you had an initial goal, but I remember I think you started by writing a thriller. It was almost like a Stephen King thriller you were writing, and then it turned into some kind of autobiography, and now it's a book to help people about wealth and finances and life. So I'm kidding. It wasn't ever. You went from fiction to nonfiction over those 2 years. That's what's crazy. I don't know how this mystery thriller novel, you wanted to be the next I don't know who the big Lee Childs or Harlan Coben or whoever these guys are. Yeah.
So, but the book is going to be definitely different. It's not going to be just your normal how-to financial book. There's plenty of those out there. Yeah. So this one's actually going to have stories and case studies and be a lot more relatable to, especially the non-financially minded person.
Sure.
Because we all need it. That's the thing. Yeah. We're all now responsible for our own retirements, like it or not. Yep. And so it really doesn't matter if you like it or you're good at it. It's something that needs to be happening. And that's why I always encourage work with a professional, because you can delegate out the things that you're not good at. You don't have to. Yep. I got this piece of advice a few years ago, and I really liked it, Tony, because, you spend time in school and college and your job trying to get better at things, hone your skills. And I was working with a business coach, and he said, okay, now you've reached the point in your life where you kind of know what you're good at. To go towards those things, do those things, and then contract out, bring people on your team to do the parts you're not good at. Stop trying to do the things that you're not good at. And
know your weaknesses and limits and to work with those. Yeah.
And I love that. I'm like, oh, okay. So I have permission to finally stop trying to practice that thing I'm never going to be good at.
Sure.
And like, I can tell you, like for Chris, like one of the challenges we always have is I'm like, you got to write things down because he's really smart. So he holds everything in his head. And I'm like, that doesn't help me when you're not here. We got to have things written down. and so it's been wonderful having a virtual assistant just to help with those, keeping up with all those kind of things.
Chris is really smart, by the way. Yeah. He's a sharp guy. But he can keep everything up here, and that it doesn't work for everybody in every situation.
It doesn't help when he's not there.
Yeah.
And so it becomes a limiting thing. And so I love, we brought virtual assistant into our team. And so they can take care of, I can say, take care of all these ankle biters because I've got these other things I'm going to take care of.
Right.
Like the radio show.
Yeah.
And so, and it comes down to that, like what makes more sense, that I'm being creative and focusing on communicating for the radio show, or that I'm sitting in front of my email answering, oh, nope, that's spam. Nope, that's spam. That's not a good use of my time at this point.
Right.
So
right.
So that's what I've been doing.
Yeah, you've been busy. You and Chris have been busy. I like it. And I think that's great. And obviously, the message, especially last week, talking about financial follies and mistakes to avoid, the key is work with a financial professional, a financial services professional, someone like yourself and Chris, for our listeners out there. But what are we talking about today? Today, we've got kind of a different topic that we haven't touched on in a while, or very little. And I think it's a fascinating one.
It is. And I'm actually, so Tony, we're going to be talking about how do you prepare to be an executor of a will? And then we'll probably weave in a little bit of long-term care insurance. But I'm really interested to do this topic, Tony, because I have been named the executor for my mom's will. And wow. I have a large family. I'm the oldest of 6. Mm-hmm. And so, it's one of those, what's the joke? Take someone that you like the least and make them the executor of your will.
Oh, I'm sure your mom still loves you. Although it may not seem like it since she gave you that job, but I love that line.
Right. And it's the thing is it's like no good deed definitely goes unpunished. And
yes.
And I can tell you, I just wanted to share a story. I don't know what everyone's probably had a different experience, but when someone's death happens, it tends to bring out the worst in people sometimes. And,
because their emotions are running high. And
but the people in your family who you thought were the kindest, gentlest people can all of a sudden get a little pushy, or they want a little peace. And I have a client, and they came from a large Irish Catholic family, and at the will, one of her brothers obviously was the executor, and when it came time for the will, he just said, "You know what? We're just going to divide everything evenly." And one of his sisters, she was like, kind of the mousy, quiet, just kind of, go along.
Yep.
She wanted to hear the will read. And he's like, no, we'll just divide everything evenly. And she demanded it. And so they read the will, and she had been cut out of the will. Her mom said she had given her enough money during her lifetime, that she had gotten enough, and she didn't get anything.
Oh, wow.
And so
yikes.
It was, her brother was trying to do the generous thing and say, let's just divide it equally. And, and then there was the consternation about, do we keep the house? It's the family house, or do we sell the house? And all that.
There's so many aspects to this, aren't there?
But it's hard. And it's, for whatever reason, it just brings out, I guess people think maybe it's like winning the lottery potentially, like I'm going to get an inheritance or whatever, don't be surprised if you're in this situation as an executor and you're dealing with some people's emotions that you might be a little surprised.
Well, yeah, and I think probably a lot of our listeners out there, Tara, probably expect to become an executor of an estate at some point from a family member or their parents. And, there's got to be a lot of listeners out there who are going to find themselves in this situation. You don't think about it or think you might, but you'd be surprised. And I think that a lot of us obviously would want to take that task on for somebody we care about, but it can be intimidating. And I think people don't realize how much work it is because my sister-in-law, my wife's dad passed away this last
Mm,
year. And it was cancer and it's a tragedy. He was a great guy. But there's three kids, her and her sister and her brother. And um her brother, he's really busy, has a career, and he's not that involved. He's a great guy, but he just isn't that involved, and he's not the kind. He's really laid back and just, casual kind of guy. He's not going to take charge. And Sarah offered to help, but Stacy's more take charge, and she took over as the executor. Well, she's still sorting through it. I mean,
mhm.
it is a lot of work, and I'm hearing what she has to do and the hoops you have to jump through and all the things. And I'm like, wow, yeah, this is something that's important to talk about on the show because I don't think people realize what goes into it.
No, and you why would you? Because it's like one of those additional tasks. And there are people that do this professionally, but I always tell my clients, I'm like, okay, you need to have a will, and I don't need to know what's in your will, but someone needs to know where it is.
Yes,
And as
probably a
your
couple of different people.
right, and as your financial planner, I would like to know where the will is so that I can point your executor to it, because I'm going to be one of the first people the family will come to when it
Yes.
comes to that situation. And it starts out with having to look all those critical documents up. So the will being
Yep.
the most important one. And then, with my clients, I do a from the heart journal where they fill out all this information in case they pass, with, bank account information, passwords. Our life today, if you don't have a password, forget about it.
Yep. Yep.
And so the more that you can do to prepare all that kind of information, the more you will help your family members and help everybody with what they're doing, because it's just on and on. I can tell you, I helped one of my clients through the process. She was older and didn't have any family in the area,
Sure.
no kids. And it was just simple things like getting the death certificate. And she wanted to pay off, her husband had a brand new sports car, and she wanted to pay off the note, and the bank wouldn't let her pay off the note until she provided a death certificate. And it was just like, it was a process. And then
That's one thing that Stacy ran into, my wife's sister, is that's a big tip that a lot of people don't know about. And I've learned from talking to you and other people who have been executors over the years, when the person passes, a lot of times the funeral home will take care of getting you get death certificates, and you need multiple. You
right.
always want more than you think. Like they think, well, we'll get four. No, no, nope. Ask for multiple. Pay for extras. Because in order to do anything, you're going to have to show especially with accounts that need to be paid off and banking institutions, anything like that. You're going to need a
Hmm.
death certificate. Yeah, I just want to throw
Right.
that out there. Yeah.
No, and I would foot stomp that, because that was just like nothing could happen until that was done. And so it was just, yeah, it was quite a process. And then, depending on the estate size and complexity, it can just get more and more complicated from there. And so there's art, you can actually, the thing is if you're appointed the executor, you don't have to know how to do everything. And I would just encourage you to remember that you don't have to know how to do everything. Your job is to just kind of see what the big picture is and make sure things are happening. So
Sure.
you can reach out to, a lawyer or an accountant, or, kind of whatever question you have. It's just, you want to think of yourself, you're like the coach. You're the
Yeah.
coach, making sure that everything's happening and all the things. But don't, some people I see, Tony, they'll really struggle because all of a sudden they're spending hours on Google and researching and trying to figure out how to
Yep.
do everything. And if you're busy and you have your own family and your own job, you may not have time for that. So I would just say, give yourself permission to bring in the experts as you need them to help you manage the whole situation. Because being an executor, just remember, you're just appointed to make sure it's all happening. Doesn't mean you all of a sudden have to become the expert on everything.
Sure. Sure. That is true as well. So, and you mentioned something earlier about, family members, and it can bring out the emotions. And what do we do? What's something our listeners can do if emotions run high and they're an executor? Because that's probably going to happen. There's always somebody who's going to be upset about something.
So first of all, prepare yourself. Just expect it. If it doesn't
Yeah.
happen, then that's good. But just kind of
Yeah.
take your deep breath, prepare yourself ahead of time, and expect it to happen. But then that's where you get to back into the will and say, you know what?
Yeah.
This is not me. This is not my opinion. This is not my idea. I am just executing the will here as it is written, and just go back to that. Yeah, just stick to the plan. And that's why, when I'm talking with, with my clients, I'm always trying to help them be as the kindest thing you can do for your family is be very well prepared, because at the time of reading your will, that's not when you want people are not in a good emotional state to be figuring out details.
Yeah.
What they just want is a list of here's the things you need to do. And so stick to the plan. Don't be afraid to lock up the house while the will's being read and getting everything organized. And it doesn't have to be done in a hurry either. So, you can take a breath, take a minute, and just kind of go through the process and just make it a process.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's important. In fact, it's critically important, and obviously that makes me think. Really, the best thing that's going to make all this easier is if there was having a plan in place ahead of time. Work with a financial services professional alongside maybe an estate planning attorney, and you think, oh, that takes time and money, and people. That's the biggest thing people put off because nobody likes to think about, their demise or the loss of a spouse, but or their parents. But you've got to communicate with each other, with your spouse and your parents, about these situations in case. And you got to have wills and a living will and powers of attorney. The powers of attorney are a big part of this too, aren't they?
It really makes everything clear, because anything that's not clear, the state's going to get involved. Essentially, is what's going to happen. And so a decision will be arrived at, but you can really streamline the process and set your family up for success by preparing and doing those things. So that's nice from the end of what you can do. But if you're the executor who's on the receiving end, then you're going to have to make the best of what you've gotten. And so that first step is you want to gather all the right documents and kind of make sure you have the big picture. And then once you have that, just like we do with financial planning, Tony, then you kind of go, oh, okay, I feel like there's some things missing here. And then that's where you might want to pull in, an attorney or a CPA or somebody to say, okay, I feel like there's some gaps here. How do we cover these gaps? And figure out what all the pieces are that need to happen.
Yeah. And that's why it's beneficial if the person had been working with somebody like yourself, because then you know where these documents are and where they're at. And speaking of that, let's take a minute. Let's take a little break here to let our listeners know how they can get a hold of you and talk to you and Chris. And I know you work alongside estate planning attorneys that you can recommend. So if people have questions about this, how can they set up that complimentary consultation with you and Chris?
Sure, Tony. The number is 719-210-4242. It's 719-210-4242. And Tony, as we're having this conversation, you're just reminding me that I need to actually, as part of my annual review that I'm getting ready to do with all my clients, we need to go back and revisit the From the Heart Journal and make sure that people have done that. And because that's not something that you ever want to do. It's never at the top of your list. Right. And so I'm making a note to myself that I'm going to sit down with my clients and make the list of who's done it and who hasn't, and make sure, it's a naughty list. But for anyone listening, if this is something that you haven't done, give Chris and I a call, 719-210-4242. And part of our complimentary consultation, if you mention it on the show, I'll walk you through the From the Heart Journal so that you can make sure that you're getting your ducks in a row, for your family.
Yeah, and that's good. Talking about being an executor and wills and trusts and powers of attorney, there's a lot there. There's a lot to know, and so I would highly recommend our listeners give you a call. Now, you mentioned you wanted to talk a little bit about long-term care. And I know we've talked about long-term care before on the show. Um, Here's why. I'm just going to throw this out. Now, Medicare doesn't really cover long-term care, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So when you meet with people and you're coming up with a plan, how do people pay for long-term care? Because I know as a fact from my father-in-law who passed, and my mom was in long-term care for a while, and my mother-in-law, I know it can cost as much as $12,000 a month. So how in the world can you possibly prepare for that?
Well, Tony, I see that there's basically three basic ways that I see people do it. Is the first
Okay.
way people basically just go, I'm just going to self-insure. I'm just going to save money, and part of my retirement nest egg is going to be for long-term care. Some people go down a path of buying long-term care insurance, and that
Sure.
kind of works like car insurance, that if you use it, great. If you don't use it, you don't get your money back. And the strategy that I like to do that builds momentum is looking at a whole life policy that will allow you to be converted to long-term care if you need it. But then if you don't need long-term care, you still keep control of your money.
Mm.
So, I talk with people about long-term care, and in the Air Force, we used to call it operational risk management. But before we would get in the airplane and go fly any mission, we had to fill out a sheet and go, what's the risk? How much sleep has everybody had? How experienced is the crew? Do we have any brand new co-pilots or engineers? And kind of as a crew, before we went on the mission, we said, okay, here's the level of risk that we're dealing with, so that we were very clear about it. And long-term care is one of those conversations I want people to understand is when you're healthy, you're kind of like, I don't want to pay for that. I feel fine.
Right,
and
that's true,
and
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 people
that
don't like to think about it, and people think, "Well, that's not gonna happen to me." That's a common misconception too, and
right.
we've seen study after study and surveys, and basically right now, it's more than 1 out of every 3 people. It's almost 2 out of every 3 people will end up needing long-term care at some point. So if you or your spouse, probably one of you at least will end up needing long-term care.
Well, and here's the thing, and I talk about it in the book, is when you're making a financial decision, it's got to start with this: what problem am I trying to solve? If you don't know what problem you're trying to solve, you're not going to get there. And if you feel healthy, then you're like, I don't need insurance because I'm fine. There's no problem. So what you need to think about is there's two problems that long-term care will solve. And so the first one is long-term care will protect your nest egg, because if you don't have any kind of long-term care insurance, then that means you can't spend all your money. So you're going to have to live a little carefully in retirement out of fear, because you don't know if you're going to need long-term care. And
Right,
so you don't have permission to spend your money because you don't know if you're going to need it later. So that makes it a
right.
little more challenging. So it's protecting your nest egg. And then the second thing is long-term care gives you more control. And if you have that insurance, then you kind of get to decide as you start to need more help. Can you stay home and get an in-home healthcare person, or looking at what you're going to do? Because for some people, I've seen it, Tony, where they haven't made a plan. Maybe they're a surviving spouse, so their income got severely reduced because pensions went away, and they didn't plan. So the only thing left then is to sell the house and go on to Medicaid, and that's not a plan. Nobody wants to live like
No.
that. And
No,
so,
no.
so
That's
long-term care and doing the protection side of your financial planning, Tony, it's all about putting you in the driver's seat so that you get to control what's happening.
right. Right, and I know that the traditional long-term care insurance has been so expensive in the past, and a lot of people don't like it, but, there are, some strategies and options, to help cover and prepare for long-term care. There are other vehicles out there. I know that, fixed index annuities that a lot of retirees use now for, retirement, planning. You can get riders, there's a fee, but the rider will increase that amount each month if you need long-term care to help cover it. So there are a number of newer insurance options to help with long-term care. But, people, I think one thing, Tara, people think, well, the government, you said Medicare doesn't cover it, but people say, well, Medicaid or the government will kick in if I can't pay for it. But, that doesn't happen until you're completely broke, right? I mean,
Right.
do you really? I mean, you have to spend down. They'll leave you with $2,000, and if you have a home, you can still keep your home. Otherwise, that's it. They'll take everything, and before that'll kick in.
Right. And that's that's why it goes back to that operational risk management of assessing, okay, what are the options, what's the pros and cons of each option,
Sure.
and then the hard part, right, is none of us has that crystal ball to know
Right.
exactly what we're going to need.
Right.
So because then it would be easy. And so I always like to try to look at how can you be as prepared as possible but keep control of as much of your money as possible.
Yeah, that's
and
huge.
and that's why it actually has to, this is part of that conversation I like to have with people, where we talk about building that momentum of your money and giving your money more than one job, and looking at how you want to do it, because that way you make a choice about what's right for you based on a lot more understanding of what the options are.
Sure.
And
And
and so
that's important.
yeah, and I mean, and long-term care is it's no fun, but most people really need to start thinking about it in their 50s and 60s when you're healthy, because the way insurance works, good or bad, is when you need it, it's not the time to get it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
You
You can't wait. The longer you wait, the more it's actually going to cost you. And people might not think that, but you really can't wait until you're almost needing it to get it. That's not going to work. So, yeah, again, it's part of the overall plan. It's just yet another piece in that puzzle. Wills, estate planning, being an executor, long-term care planning. Long-term care is a big issue in this country right now because so many people, we have an aging population and so many people need it. And with the really the increase of Alzheimer's and dementia, that has created that's a huge need for long-term care. And really a lot of people get to the point where they need all the services. They need help with everything, and that's where the costs come in. So having a plan, obviously working with you and Chris is a good start.
It's absolutely, and if you have done any looking into long-term care, they have it what they call the 6 activities of daily living. And those activities, if you're not familiar, you can Google them. It's bathing, caring for incontinence, dressing, eating, getting on or off the toilet, and transferring from a bed to a chair. These are all the things that long-term care, where you're going to need that extra help, because
Yeah.
I know my parents went through it with when they were first married. The mother-in-law had to move in, and very quickly she went from functional to she couldn't get out of bed by herself. She couldn't go to the bathroom by herself. They were both working, so they had to get in-home health care.
Yeah.
Because you got to do something.
Yes.
And long-term care generally is kind of, there's 3 different areas, because there's terminal illness, which that makes sense, but there's also critical illness and chronic illness. And so these different categories, different monies can be made available for the different categories, because again, we don't have the crystal ball to know
what's going to happen. Yeah.
And Tony, there's just illnesses that pop up. I have a client who, I thought she was going to be the caretaker of her family, for the long term. And Tony, she just passed away.
Oh.
Like that. And she got an illness that was unexpected, and it can just flip on a dime. And so I think a big part of any good financial plan is you've got to have your 401ks and the matching and building that nest egg. But right along with it, you've got to be protecting that money so that you get to enjoy it. And it's like offense and defense on a team, where you can't be all offense or all defense. You've got to have that balance.
Yep, you do. Well, you know what, Tara, on that note, we're out of time, but let our listeners know how they can get a hold of you.
Sure, Tony. So you can give Chris and I a call at 719-210-4242. It's 719-210-4242. If you want to take a look at your financial plan and make sure that you have that right balance between your offense and your defense, because you don't want to be one bad medical situation from having your whole retirement turned upside down.
That's right. That's right. Well, thanks, Tara. And that does it for today's episode of Nolan Financial Radio with our host, Tara Nolan.
Join us again for another episode of Nolan Financial Radio. Take care, and we'll talk with you next time.